Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host, and in my hand is the Bible for the upcoming campaign. This is the Voters Pamphlets, which each of you, all of you, should have gotten a copy of this in the mail, the latest mail. And the one I'm very much interested in is the local Portland, Oregon race here in Portland, Oregon. Okay, we've got some interesting races. We've got some interesting candidates. I mean, we've got some interesting issues with the whole issue of the coronavirus and homelessness and police and public safety and budgetary issues, all kinds of things. We're going to be able to get it here right in the major city, the largest city in the state of Oregon. And they even throw a little bit about the national politics. I mean, the only thing I think about the national politics, I think about the Como brothers, you know what I mean? Both one's the governor and the other the CNN, okay? And then you've got the whole issue with the president-elect, okay? All right, you've got him there. And so we've got a lot of things to discuss, folks. But like I said, primarily we're going to be trying to focus on the mayoral race here in the Portland metropolitan area. There are many things. As you know, this is, when you think about Portland, Oregon, that is the living room, if you will, of the Pacific Northwest in Portland, Oregon. I mean, what a beautiful place to be. But we've been having issues with it of late. I mean, when you start thinking about downtown Portland, you ask yourself, it's supposed to be the city of roses. And I tell you, it's been pretty tough trying to get a rose even to grow during this particular time. We got homelessness all over the place. There are issues. We're a sanctuary city. In fact, we're a sanctuary state, if you will. It's causing us many, many problems. Nobody have answers in terms of what we do. We're sitting right in the middle, if you will, of two other states, the state of California and the state of Washington, if you will. And here we are, right down in all the, in fact, I-5, the highway basically divides us in half. In fact, I-5 just goes straight through the city of Portland, right here. And wow, what a day. Wow, I tell you. Well, anyway, I've got some things. We're going to just throw a few things, but what we're going to do is that, like I said, this is a start. The start, as I indicated before, a couple months or so ago when the whole issue of voting and actually the election became a reality. And at that point in time, I just happened to have gotten into the race myself and filed for office and the like, and several other people did. And all of a sudden, to date, we've got 19 people that have filed to run against the race. One of those 19 is a guy by the name of Ted Wheeler, okay? Ted Wheeler is running against Mayor Ted Wheeler. So he's a very interesting time. And then we've got a number of, and we've got 3 seats open. We've got 3 open seats on the city council. You've got 5 people on the city council. And 3 of those seats are open. One who is an incumbent, and the other 2 seats are all open. And then next you've got the mayor seat that's open also, so to speak, because that seat's going to be open too. That's the run. So it's a very interesting individual. As you know, when you're making decisions on the city council, you've got to have at least 3 votes. At least the mayor has to have 3 votes, or someone else has 3 votes, and it can go either way. And so we're going to have a very exciting race. And so we're going to do that. And then what I'm going to do, and I think I'll throw you some other little interesting notes. To date, we had an interesting article in the Oregonian that was on February the 24th. Front page, it says court okays limits on campaign contributions. Well, I tell you what, I'm not going to go into exactly what that's all about, but later on, I'm going to be interviewing a candidate, the first candidate that reached out after me, after I've been trying to reach out to candidates on cable, on Oregon Voters Digest talk show for weeks, trying to get them to come on and share their views as to why they're running for office and the like. But anyway, I found a brave soul. He's a very awesome guy. He just so happened to be former military for some reason, of the 101st. And very interesting guy by the name of Jack Jack Kerfoot. Okay, and Jack's going to be on the other half of the show, and we're going to interview this guy. He's a very exciting guy. I had the opportunity to chat with him and whatever. A hard worker. I mean, he's knocking on doors through his home, like I am here in podcast. I mean, show goes on. The show goes on here at the Oregon Voters Digest. And so anyway, Jack's got some good, interesting deals. He knows the issues. I'm really excited about this guy. And I'll tell you, one secret about it, I'm really excited about this guy. He's the first guy that ever reached out to me and asked whether or not I would support it. And I'll tell you, after looking at that resume, and that's one of the things that I've always demanded, that if you're going to run for office, you got to have a resume of some sort. And trust me, he was carrying a resume at the time. And I'm not taking it back. I'm not saying that the other candidates doesn't have something to say. As far as I'm concerned, anybody who files for office, as far as I'm concerned, is certified, so to speak, because they've got to have something on their mind. And then so that's why I try to reach out to give them more than 1 minute or 2 minutes to express themselves. They need more time. Everybody needs time. But because we need ideas that will better our way of life here in the city of Portland. So anyway, that's a good deal. And I'm going to ask Jack about this whole issue of campaign contribution. It'll be interesting in terms of what he says. Another little tidbit I'd like to share is that there was another article that appeared in the Portland Tribune. You know, it's kind of like the one major newspaper that realistically really hits all of the factions here in the city of Portland. And it's on the newsstand too. They've gone to a new level now because, you know, trying to get newsprint is tough, but in all due respect for senior citizens and older folks and just, just enthusiasts, if you will, as far as picking up a newspaper with a cup of coffee or something like that and reading. I mean, it's enjoyable, you know what I mean? But they're having some tough times. So they basically went back to the news media via video, if you will. But as far as the Tribune is concerned, they're still going to be sending the paper out, i.e., you can get your own. They've got a deal now where you can buy a package deal for something like about $99 or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, you can get the paper delivered to your home. And with the coronavirus situation right now, boy, what a deal! Getting your paper there at home. Okay. But anyway, there was an article that was in the Thursday, April 2nd piece, and there was an interesting article. And the head of the article said the virtual city club mayoral debate a modest success. That's an interesting piece. But the thing that got me about it was the one that says, and I'll read part of it. Hardesty defies expectation. Remember Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, who basically there was a runoff between her and Loretta Smith, and she won. And so there she was, and she had her platform was pretty heavy. She wasn't really a Mayor Wheeler at that point in time. If anything, she had her own platform. But police was a very interesting issue, and the bottom line is that when she got on board, the mayor did not give her the police position of taking that lead. So consequently, she was out of that piece. I think she got parks. Yeah, she didn't get parks. She got the fire department that I know of. You know what I mean? She probably got other responsibilities. But here's the deal. Here's the big news. I don't know if you know this, but let me tell you what she says. What it says here. Hardesty defies expectation. And by the way, this was brought to you by Jim Redden, one of the reporters there at the Tribune. Contrary to expectations, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty has struck up a close professional and personal relationship with Mayor Ted Wheeler on the city council. When Hardesty was running for the council last year, some political insiders, including sources, predicted she would clash with Wheeler and even try to form a voting bloc with the two other women commissioners against him and the late Commissioner Nick Fish. Hardesty fueled this speculation by seeming to take some shots at Wheeler during her campaign. But after a rough start where Hardesty was the lone no vote against her first city budget, tensions have eased and Hardesty is now supporting Wheeler. She endorsed him for re-election and has repeatedly praised his leadership during the coronavirus or COVID-19 crisis. Interesting. Okay. But guess what? There was another little piece that was cited in this particular article that was done. It says campaign gathering dust. Oregon Governor Brown I'm sorry, Oregon Governor Brown's stay-at-home order derailed perennial candidate Bruce Broussard, a low budget campaign for Portland mayor. Former U.S. Marine and restaurant owner Broussard has run for numerous local offices over the years, including mayor in 2016. When he received 4% of the vote, Broussard still, and by the way, I finished fourth out of again another 18 or 19 people that were running. Broussard still had hundreds of lawn signs left over from that race, which he planned to put up along many streets. And then I made the statement was, but I can't go out now or I'll be arrested, Broussard told sources last week. I'll have to wait until 2021. Interesting comments. Well, I'm here, folks. I'm not going anywhere. But the fact of the matter is that we've got many issues here in the city of Portland, and we've got quite a campaign here. It's going to be a major, major, major change in Portland as far as this election is concerned. And so we got some major, major issues. We've got things like, on our present form, the city council, all city council members, and the mayor are basically responsible for the entire city. The entire city. I mean, no one pretty well knows just who to call down at City Hall. So meaning that you don't have there's no, but unlike Multnomah County, they're districtized. The city of Portland is not. So consequently, people are very interested. There's a major concern here. In fact, that was one of the issues that I was bringing up when I ran the last time around, that we should districtize the city of Portland. We need it big time, okay? Besides the issues of homelessness and things of that nature. But people want to know, who can I call? Who can I call? Who will visit my area to talk about the issues that I have in response to the city? Who will respond to the city of Portland for me? And so that's a big issue aspect of it. So now you have it. You got that piece. And then the other one, like I said, I think I shared that other piece with you about well, anyway, the City Club of Portland also held a which I thought was very important. In the City Club of Portland, which I'm a member, by the way. They put a piece on the top 4 candidates. Kind of interesting. I had never heard of a poll, but it's my understanding that the response I got from some of the insiders was Bruce, it was all based on money and that kind of a deal. And so that basically said, well, fine. What happened to the poll? But anyway, they had their deal. They pretty well selected 4 people for the mayor's office aspect of it, and they just recently had they recently had another forum, if you will, for mayors, which was on Channel 2. Channel 2. Steve Den, he does a good job. He's been doing this for years. Your voice, your vote. You might have heard about that. KTU. Okay, got me. It was one. They did one last week, and then they did one just recently. Today, which was Sunday, from 8:30 to 9:30, and I thought that was an interesting interview. And in fact, the campaign, that particular one, in fact, that particular interview of the mayoral candidates was video, okay. But what was interesting about it was that when they did it today, the paper Friday said one of the major issues about capping campaign funding, if you will, as far as funding to the candidates, they kept it at $500. About 87% of the city, the county, and whatever, and basically signed off on that. But there were some folks that were fighting against that. They were taking more than 500, and leading the charge was Mayor Ted Wheeler, and that was one of the questions that was being asked of all of the 4 candidates that were there. And it was interesting about the comments that he had made. And in the comments that he had made, he had defied. He was basically being fined or something to that effect by the city auditor's office, and that was not in his position. That was not. It was still up in the grab or whatever. But clearly, the paper said court okays limits on campaign contributions. And as I indicated before, I'm going to have Jack comment because he had a very unique situation. And the fact of that is that he was kind of like part and parcel of that process. It's going to be neat to hear what he has to say about that part. Now, again, I'm talking about Jack Kerfoot, who's running for position number 2. Okay. Now that I've said that, we've caught up on everything, I think, at this point in time. And what we're going to do, we're going to basically take a break here very shortly. I think we're getting to that particular point now. I think I might go on and take a break. Okay. And what we'll do right after that, we'll come back with my dear friend Jack Kerfoot from the 101st. I mean, man, he's coming all the way from the 101st. What a guy. I mean, you need your help nowadays, especially in our society. Okay? So what we'll do, we'll take this short break, and I'll be right back. Jack. Coming back from break, folks. Here I am, Bruce Broussard again. Here we are, folks. Remember the Bible? I said to you, this is the first campaign is on. Here's the voters pamphlet. Make sure you get that voters pamphlet, because in all due respect, it really says something to you. I mean, seriously, if you're really looking for a resume, it's part of the resume. But the real resume is the person themselves. As I've indicated before, I reached out all over the place on my shows at Oregon Voters Digest, on the studio when it was open, and reached out, and not too many candidates contacted me in any way, shape, or form. I was prepared to actually come on the show. So we had the idea of going home and staying home routine. I mean, I was still trying to reach out, and along the way, right before we had to all go home, I met a gentleman by the name of Jack. Jack of the 101st. I mean, it wasn't like a guy coming across the mountain, or coming out of the gorge, and then an army dude from the 101st, big time. I'll tell you what, he's here with us now, and we're going to give him the opportunity to basically share with us why he's running for office, and maybe we might hit him with a few questions that I'm sure you'll be interested in his response and whatever. And I'm really excited about having Jack here. But I'm also saying I'm still open for folks to give me a call. You know how to reach me. That's on you. You know how to get in touch with me. Contact me, and we'll set something up for you. But in most cases, you got to have this whole business about the Zoom piece, and that is like the pod. Because I'm doing the show from my home. That is the new studio here, and so consequently, you got to have certain equipment. Otherwise, we may have you call us on the phone. We might be able to do it that way too. But I'm very interested in getting your feedback, and in fact, I know the 101st would be very interested too, because I'm going to have him come on. He may be sitting in my seat, asking me a question or two, and you know what I mean as we get along in the show. Okay, so fine. Let's see if we can get Jack on now. Is Jack there?
Yes, good afternoon, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be on your program, and one veteran to another. Good afternoon.
I appreciate that, Jack. Really appreciate that. You're right in front of me again, not being redundant, but the fact of the matter is, I was very impressed with how you reached out to me, and we sat down and we chatted on 2 or 3 different occasions. And I tell you, I mean, I was very excited. You were very familiar with a number of the issues, but I think that now, besides the fact that we have a voters pamphlet, we also have the opportunity with this podcast that I have to share with the public and across the board as to who you are and what you bring to the city, as I've sensed that you've done, and then we'll go from there. So Jack, why don't you just open up a little bit and kind of just share a little bit about yourself, your background a little bit, and whatever, and because you got your package and whatever you want to do as an introduction.
All right, Bruce, thank you very much. Well, who's Jack Kerfoot? Well, Jack Kerfoot is very determined. I was determined to overcome my humble beginnings and graduate from university. So I worked minimum wage jobs for 2 years to save money for university. Then I served with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam, returned, worked my way through university, and then graduated with a degree in geophysics in 1976. After that, America at that time, when I graduated, was suffering from a different type of energy crisis, a fuel shortage. So I started to work in the oil and gas for the energy industry in 1976, and that took me around the world, meeting and working with governments, ministers, scientists, and even heads of states all across the world. During that time, of course, we've seen extreme volatility in the commodity price of oil and natural gas. We've seen it go from 8 to 38 and back to 8 in a 10-year period of time. So I learned to become very experienced at leading organizations and leading turnarounds when there are economic downturns. Very similar to what we have in Portland right now, the economic downturn because of the coronavirus, the pandemic. Unfortunately, that experience is going to be absolutely necessary on our city council. Leading a bureau as a commissioner is very similar to leading a business. You have to lead dozens of perhaps even hundreds of people in an organization. You have to manage a budget, and you have to also stay connected to the people that you serve, which are the voters. Unfortunately, what we don't see as city commissioners is anyone that will actively go out and meet with the people across the community. And one of the things that I've done in my campaign, and I'm pledging to continue to do, is to meet with groups across the city, the entire city, Northwest, North, Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest, on a regularly scheduled basis to make sure I hear their concerns and their issues, and to make sure their voice is heard in City Hall, and to make sure that their voice, that my voice and their voices resonate. I want to make sure to invite the press to these town hall meetings to make sure that other members of City Hall, other commissioners and the mayor also can hear about this in the paper or on the news media to make sure everyone's voice is heard.
Sounds great, Jack. Now let's see if we can get right into the campaign aspect of it. If I were to ask you, what do you feel are some of the major issues here facing Portland, and then basically what would be the outcome of your sitting on your seat? How would you react to those issues?
Well, there's several issues. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I love Portland, is our city's been heading in the wrong direction with our homeless crisis. We have literally hundreds of nonprofits with no coordination, working independently to try and help the homeless, and also competing for the same funds from the same sources of funds. The city's heading in the wrong direction with affordable housing. The city has passed measures which have dramatically driven up the building cost, which is driving up the cost for new housing and also the cost for apartments and rents as well. The city is heading in the wrong direction with safety. Vision Zero, the city's program to reduce traffic fatalities, is failing miserably. And there are clearly measures that have been applied in other cities around the world that could be used to reduce the traffic fatalities and make our streets safer. But those actions are not being taken. And the city is also going in the wrong direction in our neighborhood associations. We have one commissioner that's trying to eviscerate the entire neighborhood associations, which I opposed. I gave testimony in support of the neighborhood associations before City Hall in November of last year. And my testimony almost mirrored the League of Women Voters position in November of 2019. And finally, the city is heading in the wrong direction with fiscal responsibility. How many times have we read in the paper, unfortunately all too often, that cost overruns, budget overruns for major projects are over by 200, 300, 400%. And that, quite candidly, is inexcusable. In our current economic crisis, we cannot have that. We need a city council and a commissioner that can have a business insight and understanding and bring our city back out of this economic downturn. People are hurting, and this crisis will only get worse without proper leadership.
You know, Jack, it seems as though on the issue of the coronavirus aspect of it, I say coronavirus as opposed to the 19 piece, but the fact of the matter is, it looks like there's a lot of interest from a national perspective. The presidential race, I'll put it that way. You got my point. The New York, this is a New York issue. I'll put it that way, even better, a New York issue. But we have an issue here in Portland, Oregon, or the state of Oregon for that matter. Well, first off, let's talk a little bit about how did Kate Brown, and how did you feel about how did Kate Brown respond to the corona issue, and also, and then talk to, after seeing that, we talk about various areas in the state of Oregon, and Portland is a separate. It's the largest city in the state of Oregon, and it has this issue. And then relate that to the corona city.
Well, that's a good, excellent question. It's of course a complicated question as well when we talk about a disease that we still do not fully understand and there's no vaccine for. But from the governor's standpoint, she was, I can argue, was slow to respond to the isolation from that standpoint. What we need to do now is to look for ways to ensure that we get more testing equipment out to the hospitals and we provide more support for the hospitals. I have friends that are doctors that are now working 36-hour a day, 36-hour shifts. And if one of the staff come in contact with someone that has the coronavirus and they're not aware of it, then they have to go into quarantine. So a small contact can all of a sudden reduce the staff in a hospital by 10%, which we can't afford. Now, fortunately, we've not experienced the degree and concentration of the coronavirus to our states to the north and to the south, nor compared to New York. But we have to recognize that without adequate testing, the numbers that we read in the paper are probably only a fraction of the actual number of cases we have out there. The other factor we have to recognize, and this is the one that I'm really concerned about, is that our homeless are living probably in a lot of the camps in close proximity to one another. And yet there's no ability for us to go out and reach out to them, to give them testing and to make sure that they are safe and help explain to them what they must do to mitigate the risk of catching this. Because many of these people do not have any medical insurance or any way to get to a hospital. So they are very isolated and very vulnerable.
You know, another area that has been responding and basically getting major attention has been the whole issue around the country, for that matter, and naturally here in the state of Oregon, and that is the whole issue of sanctuary cities. Okay, and we got a sanctuary state, but we've got a sanctuary city, one of the largest in the state of Oregon, for that matter. Have you looked into that? Have you done any research on that? And what would be your position on the whole issue of sanctuary city?
Well, immigration is a topic that needs to be at both the federal level and at the state level as well. Unfortunately, I've had some firsthand experience of that. When my wife and I were married 41 years ago, we were in Calgary, and my wife's a Canadian citizen. So we went to the consulate and initially were told that my wife could not get even a visa to enter the United States for 9 to possibly 12 months. So we went back again, and I called my congressman, and he said, no, that's not correct. So we went back, and we were finally able to get her a visa. But in the process, she had to fill out literally thousands of pages to get the visa so she could enter into the United States, as well as medical tests. Well, finally, we got the visa, and we drove down from Calgary on our way to California, and we passed into the immigration or the border crossing in Idaho. And so it was a one-person border crossing station, and we gave our passports and all the volumes of paper that we had for my wife's visa application to the one border guard. And his comment was, well, let me stamp your passports, this is fine. And to my wife, he said, well, would you like this information back? And we said, well, no. So he threw it in the rubbish bin. And we said, wait a minute, time out here. What's going on? He said, well, this has been, hasn't been a requirement for well over a year. And the consulate in Calgary, even though we keep writing letters, doesn't get the correct information. So we ultimately got down to the Bay Area for me to start a job and my wife to start processing for immigration. They were told, oh no, the visa that was stamped on your entry passport isn't the right one. We'll give you the right visa. So we have, unfortunately, some major issues that need to be addressed relative to immigration. Now, if we talk about sanctuary city, unfortunately, we turn this into a political football, if you want. If we really want to be sincere about helping immigrants, then what we need to do is to look what some of the organizations have done, like the Archdiocese, which has had a long-standing position on helping immigrants and to help them get proper documentation to help them become legal citizens in this country. So we need to look for ways to help the immigrants to get the documentation that they need so they can become legal immigrants. So my position is, let's not talk about it, Let's not make this a campaign policy. Let's take positive, real action to help the immigrants in our city.
And another area that, as you note, if you saw the first part of the show, I was sharing some tidbits from the local media about the whole issue of campaign finance. Okay, and one of those there at the front page basically said that that the Supreme Court had made a decision on decision for, if you will, the residents or the voters here in the city of Portland, in that some 90% of the people approved the fact they wanted to cap campaign finance funding up at least $500, and that whole rationale there is that they wanted to make sure that whoever gets elected is well represented and give folks the opportunity, if they've got any ideas about bettering our way of life here in the city of Portland, that person should be given the opportunity to do that. And a lot of times they're constantly fighting the big money, if you will. And that's just in a simple way of putting it. But that's basically what the bottom line. People are frustrated with the fact that they're not getting the kind of representation at City Hall. Would you like to comment on that piece? We talk a little bit about that.
Well, absolutely. There are a lot of different layers to answer that question. First of all, as it was advertised in the ballot, it was really designed to limit money from outside sources. As we saw in the gubernatorial election, literally hundreds of thousands and up to $1 million were given to gubernatorial candidates. So that was the ballot on the measure, and there were other aspects of it as well. Now, initially that was passed in the city council, and then it was taken up, and parts of those measures were overturned by the state Supreme Court. But some of the measures that were still left in place was the fact that you were supposed to notify on any of your advertisements or any of your political campaigns whether or not you had outside contributions of more than $500, and if so, who were the primary donors. Now, what's happened is now there has been another appeal, and the Supreme Court has said, yes, you can actually implement this $500 limit of contributions from outside sources. And they emphasized that giving a declaration was of the number of outside supporters was absolutely the right thing to do. They also said that personal financing of your own campaign was still determined by the Supreme Court, which in 1976 said that individual people or candidates can contribute their own money to run for office. And the reason for that was taking that away would make candidates even more susceptible to outside influence. Now, in my case, what I decided to do is to fund my campaign myself. I have gotten individual contributions from people that is not with matching funds. The vast majority of the people have gone out and used city money, approximately $2.5 to $2.6 million of city money on matching funds. So if you raise $1, the city will give you $6 back. And so you're seeing literally 40, 50 people that are reaching into the city coffers to get financing for their campaigns. Now, in this current environment, that's not something that I think makes good sense. It's also important to recognize that this campaign matching financing program was originally approved about 6 years ago, and then there was a case of corruption. Someone actually stole the money that was given to them by the city, and then it was put up for vote and it was overturned. It was voted down almost unanimously, but overwhelmingly by the voters not to give city matching funds. But then 2 years ago, Commissioner Fritz decided to raise this as a city council issue and to reintroduce the city matching program based on a model out of New York City. Now, it's interesting to note that Commissioner Saltzman and Commissioner Fritz voted against that. And their argument was, we cannot support this. It needs to be brought before the electorate to actually let them decide whether or not they want to spend voters' money, city money, taxpayer money to support candidates for an election. So we have many issues from this standpoint, but I've decided that I did not want to accept city money because in August of last year, the city ran short of funds and it resulted in 60 layoffs of 60 parks employees and closing of 5 community centers and recreation centers in our city. And that just doesn't seem right to me.
You know, Jack, And as you know, I'm sure you're sensitive to the fact that if 90% of the people said no, I mean, I'm sure you really looked at that situation because people need to be told and shared with them in terms of what your feelings are about that particular. I'm sure you feel for them. That's what I got out of the conversation you and I had.
Right, yes. Well, I think it's important to recognize that sometimes measures on a ballot will look at some of the headlines, and the headlines on the ballot was, we want to make sure to limit the amount of money on how much money is coming in from outside resources. And I've limited my outside contributions at $250, not 500, but 250. And outside of that, like I say, I'm self-funding on the campaign simply because I don't want to use city money. But the major focus of the measure was to keep outside money, particularly the example they gave was the Koch brothers investing heavily to support continued use of fossil fuels, primarily coal, as in the power plants in Oregon. And unfortunately, we still are using some coal to provide electricity through PG&E. And that's what they wanted to see stopped. And that I support completely.
You know, again, and then one other point about that piece, anyway had the opportunity to see the debate this Sunday, and as far as the mayoral candidates, and each of those candidates were asked the same question. Seems as though the mayor, who, by the way, was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, basically just went counter to the public. I mean, to the people, to the residents that are here, and it just didn't come across well in terms of his response to the issue, fighting the issue as opposed to doing what he was supposed to do as far as leadership and educating the people, both from the county and the city, as to what the rationale is, and then and continue to discuss that until he understands what it is and he's gotten it across to the citizens. And then after he has done that, then take the vote. And if the vote came out basically counter his, well, guess what? Then the other entity would win the piece. So meaning that he was supposed to be basically identifying himself as a leader in that position. Very important. Very important. You don't fight the masses. You know, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who's elected to office is an employee of the people.
Absolutely.
That's the
Absolutely.
bottom line. It is still
Absolutely.
a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Very, very important.
But there was one interesting aspect in that, in the fact that the elections board has actually said he was in violation because when he puts an endorsement out or puts out a campaign ad, they had stated before this was even appealed on the Supreme Court, it was already in place, that you are supposed to list your top 5 contributors and the sources of the income from that standpoint. And that's something that I've done. Of course, I only have one contributor, which is myself, and that's from my consulting services over the years. But that's something that Mayor Wheeler should have done, and that law was actually in place.
Well, and I want to making that point about that position is because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for good leadership, people that understand what their role is. They're working for the people. Very, very important. And sometimes sometimes it does get, there's a difficulty, if you will, of understanding because we've got different levels, if you will. Some folks are more educated than others and whatever. But the bottom line is that you don't leave that whole area until you've communicated with all the people. You got me? And everybody understands it. So that when they do take a position, that's why they've elected the officers. And that's why they're looking for people like yourself and others who understand that so that they will communicate with the people. And that's I just want to make sure we bring that point across. And I just hope that I'm running against the new Ted Wheeler of the 19 that are running. And you got a sitting mayor, Ted Wheeler, but we got 2 people here. And I'm very familiar with the young man. In fact, I remember when he first ran for office, he ran for county chair. And when we interviewed that time, and in all due respect, he really didn't have the background, because he was busy doing other things. A very busy man. And I don't take that against anyone. But when you get into this kind of business, you got to have a resume. You have to have been able to mingle around with the people, if you will. And so this time around, he went to the treasurer's office, but he wouldn't interview again with the Voters Digest. And this time around, I reached out for the mayoral race of the mayor aspect of it, and he did not respond. He did not respond. I even reached out to one of his constituents who felt very strong about it from the black community, and he said that he was going to. I said, look, the bottom line is that we're all in this together. We're all in this together. And if he missed something, I'd be more than glad to share with him over a cup of coffee what's on my mind, because I do represent some people. So my point, but again, he refused. So,
Well,
so I have an issue with
Bruce,
that.
one thing to what again, my background is science. And so as a scientist, I like to look at analogs, which
Yes,
means we look back and see what's worked and what hasn't worked.
yes,
So the example that I've seen that is recognized as the best mayor we've ever had, or at least in most people's memory, is the late Vera Katz. And if you look at how she conducted herself, I think that's why people held her in such high esteem and why she's looked at even today as one of the best mayors we've had in the history of this wonderful city.
yeah. She was a tough mayor. But then there was another another Marine that was also mayor, Bud Clark. Whoop whoop.
Okay.
And he's still around, by the way. He's still around. But these are very people-oriented kind of people. You know what I mean? I mean, in their truest form, they're very community related. They're very much involved with, well, in all due respect, I mean, both of these individuals. Vera came from New York. You know what I mean? And she rose up through she went down and went to the legislature and did her thing there, and then came back here. And like you, she was a very personable person. An upfront kind of a person, tough, if you will. You know, there are others too, but the fact of the matter is, she was a very gracious lady, and she spent a lot of time here in the city of Portland and did a lot of good things. Like there's a bus that they have out there right off the waterfront there, uh, showing that aspect of love that the citizen cared for. But like I said, as Goose Hollow is still there. I can still remember the days when I was at IBM, and and I spent some time there after work with Bud, and I can still remember the day when the guys asked him to run for office, and he did that, and it was great. And then I think a lot of people still remember when he went to a restaurant and was speaking to the chief, and he had some concerns about a particular issue, but he respectfully had coffee with the chief, sit down in there, and so anyway, the chief kept saying, well, he was the chief, and Bud said, well, read my lips, you're fired. I mean, something to that effect. But my
Right.
point is that both of these individuals did it. But Bud was a very personable guy, and he still has his statue downtown. I don't know if
Right.
you're familiar with the statue aspect of it. That's the whoop whoop one. So he's still a very likable guy, and I love to see him every so often. I will see him at the Navy puts on the Navy Flyboys put on a Marine Corps birthday kind of a celebration every year, and Bud is normally there, and people like former Judge Answer Haggerty, you remember him, Federal
Yeah.
Judge Haggerty, a very much so neat person. Ted Kulangoski. These are all Marines that have served the city and the county and this country in good light, in good light. So anyway, we got some very neat people here, and I think that with a person like you, like I said, I'm feeling very comfortable about you. And then you asked me a question in our second meeting, and after a while, you basically said, Bruce, you think you might be able to support a guy like me? I said, well, gee whiz, guy. I mean, just the mere fact that you asked me, and I know you read my material because you cited some of the things that I had done. And not to say I'm taking any glory for it, whatever, but the fact of the matter is, it's good to be recognizable along that line. So your character and whatever was the one of the reasons why I said why not. I said yes, and I would definitely support you and endorse you. You can use my name in any way, shape, or form. Because you need a good
Bruce,
man.
I can't tell you what an honor it is to be supported by someone like yourself, not only a Marine, a Vietnam veteran like myself, but someone who's been so active and worked his whole life post-military to help this city in a wide range of activities. from No Veterans Left Behind to the whole community across the entire city. So it is a privilege and an honor to be endorsed by you. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Jack. I mean, and boy, I tell you, it makes me feel good too, because sometimes this is a thankless job, as you know. And that's the other thing I noticed about it, because I kept asking you, are you going to be able to deal with this issue, and as far as running for office? Because I've said to myself on some of the occasions that sometimes winning could be losing.
No, I
Heard
understand,
of that
but
before?
I have had some experience dealing with some interesting situations with
Right.
conflicts between governments, corporations, and unions, trying to make sure that we can come together. I've had partners from different countries that absolutely despised one another, but I was able to bring them together to achieve the results we needed, which was for everyone's benefit. So I have experience with that. And yes, I do have thick skin, or else I wouldn't have been able to survive for this long in my life.
Good, good. Well, another area that we didn't touch bases on it was the whole issue about public safety, and there's always been an issue of leadership in regards to the folks who are carrying out those duties. You know what I mean? People on foot, people on the ground, if you will, people out there actually dealing with the folks. We had a true police force, law enforcement, when we some time ago, and I think about guys like well, Mayor Potter. Tom Potter was a former chief and whatever. In fact, his daughter, I think, is still serving. He hasn't retired now. Harry Jackson. I don't know if you know Harry. A very neat kind of a guy, and a very community related kind of a guy. And you got Daryl Turner, who happens to be the union president right now, which but we got some very neat guys. But it still there's a lacking, if you will, of leadership. And I'm sharing that with you. And if you might want to make a couple of comments about that, because like I said, when I look at city council now, because we don't have any districtization, you're basically going to be one of 5 mayors. There might be a chairperson, but there will be 4 of the mayors right now, because you have to respond to the entire city,
Right.
not just a particular area. And I saw that in you. We talked about that, which is very important. How do you feel about the issue of Portland police?
Well, first of all, I reached out and I've talked with Daryl. I've also done 2 ride-alongs, one in the North Precinct and one in the Central Precinct, to make sure I understand the perspective and the issues that the police deal with on a daily basis. But as Portland, as in most cities in the United States, the basic facilities to help, or basic infrastructure to help the police, has disappeared. The detoxification center that was in Portland to help people if they were under the influence of alcohol or a drug for their own safety has disappeared. Mental health facilities to take someone in who was perhaps having a mental crisis, that's disappeared. And the men and women that are out there are having to deal with far more than they've ever had to deal with before. Now, I realize that the driving forces behind Black Lives Matter and statistics are compelling, but at the same time, when I've gone out across communities across the entire city, what I have consistently heard from all sectors, from all races, from all communities, is strong support for community policing. However, we have over 103 vacancies on the police force, and if we look at the entire police organization, over 500, looking at support staff. And Daryl Turner told me that 10 years ago, when he was on the police force, before he became the president of the police union, he would spend 4 to 5 hours a day community policing. He said by the end of the next 5 years, he was lucky to spend 1 to 2 hours a day because they were so understaffed. So to me, it is absolutely essential that we provide the resources and the staffing to help our police force to continue a very effective program of community policing. So from that standpoint, I think it's very important. I think it's also important as a commissioner to build bridges between the city and the police force. Unfortunately today, between the media that we have and unfortunately first response that many people have, when they read about an incident, they jump to judgment. We need to make sure before anyone takes action or anything is done, we fully understand all the facts and have a clear and in-depth understanding of what the issues are before the city council makes any action, takes any action, and comes out and makes a firm statement on the actual activity of action or incident that may have occurred. We also have to recognize that when we've had the demonstrations and we've also had the protests that turned violent, that the police are walking a very fine line. In the last ones that we had, the police were criticized for not doing enough to protect the public and the vandalism that occurred from the violence that broke out. And then they were also criticized for doing too much. So right now they are being attacked on both sides. And the reality is that may be a sign that they're doing, in these particular cases, the right amount of policing or the right action to mitigate the violence from coming out of hand. These are not easy decisions to make. And as you know, in these type of difficult situations, it doesn't take much to provoke an incident to something that becomes far worse. So we have to recognize that being on the police force is one of the most difficult jobs that I know of, even more than the military. And we need to have compassion, and we need to also have to look for new people that have the skills we need to be on the police force of today.
Okay, appreciate that, because then at the same time, it always goes back down, who is the CO?
Yes.
If you don't have a CO, you'll have a disorganized group of folks, if you will. It may be very competent, but you've got to have a CO, if you will. It is a paramilitary kind of a force. And I'm not talking about from the standpoint, you got a bunch of guys with guns, if you will, and just taking advantage of people, per se. It just takes someone that reflects, if you will, what leadership means all about. And it can be any kind of career job aspect of it. A leader is a leader is a leader, and you know them. You know, and then when you start wearing a uniform aspect of it, is acting as a deterrent. You know what I mean? When you see that uniform, it represents something. What is it deterrent? That's part of police work. But then once you get the contents of that person inside of that uniform, that's the problem. Right? So
Well,
you
I
need
can
that.
only speak to the two opportunities I had on the ride-alongs, and I was absolutely overwhelmed with the compassion and good judgment that I saw in repeated cases by the police ride-along that I had in the North Precinct and also in the Central Precinct, dealing with some very difficult situations, but doing it in a very measured action and with compassion. So that doesn't mean that police don't make mistakes, because we're all human. But what I saw was excellent policing, and I think we've got an excellent police force, although we have to recognize we have to be fair and investigate any incident that does occur.
You know, I might add too, for the benefit of the viewers, viewing audience, you can go back in the history of the Oregon Voters Digest, and I interviewed a number of police officers on my talk show, Oregon Voters Digest. Don Dupay, who's a historical buff in his own right. He just happened to he happens to be a writer too, and graduated from college lately. And but the bottom line is that he really was a true community policing kind of a person.
Right.
So if anybody wanted to kind of get a feel of what that was all about here within the Portland metropolitan areas, you know, a guy like him or Harry Jackson, you know, and there are others, you know, the Simpsons, and I know that Simpsons got his son is a police department person at this one point in time, and the elder Simpson just he was retired. You have to be a majority too. But there are many guys out here, but still, I'm making the point about the fact that you can go through the history of the Voters Digest, and you'll see those interviews, and you can really appreciate. Even like I said, even Tom Potter I've had on the show, and many other guys along that line. Very important to educate the people about what that person should look like or should do, and that's a very important piece. So again, thank you for your response in regards to your feedback in terms of what you saw. And I like about you because you're a fresh look to this town. That's a good piece. We're needing good leadership.
That fresh look is based on talking to a lot of people across the community, even very experienced and longtime residents of Portland, like Paul Knowles told me, and I think you know him very well. He's very supportive of the concept of community policing, and I've heard that to communities across the entire city. So, like I say, I want to look at the police perspective, and I also want to reach out to community leaders across the entire city to make sure I understood the real positions for the vast majority of the people in Portland.
Yeah, very much. Okay, very much so. Well, look like we're at that point, I think. We are at that point, particular point. We got a few more minutes, maybe. A few more minutes here at this point in time. And so what I'll do, I want to thank you very much, Jack, for being here with us today. And would like to share again with those other candidates that are running for city council, the mayor, or any other office for that matter. I'll be getting into other politics, but my primary focus will be in the city council and mayor's race for the city of Portland. It's very, very, very important. So please reach out to me. You know how to get to me. If not that, give me a call, 503-701-0457, 503-701-0457. And I'm sure we can come up with something. And the only other thing I have reference to is that I'll read about you in your voters pamphlet. My interpretation sometimes refer, but I pretty well know most of these folks anyway. But the fact of the matter is, I'll give you a plug. But if you want to get an opportunity to spend some time like Jack is, you just got to give me a call. I mean, really, I can't keep saying this. He's the only guy that reached out to me. Now, don't get me wrong. I know some other folks that I know, and I'm going to definitely reach out. There were a couple other people that did reach out to me, but we talked about it, but they did not appear in the voters pamphlet. And I wanted to make sure that they understand that process too. But we're still going to basically try to get involved, get these folks to get a little time, if you will, because you really, that was the other thing I was going to share with Jack, and I'm sure he probably saw this between the county and the city. I just don't like the way the citizens are received when they go up before the county or the city to talk, to share their thought, being given 3 minutes. What can you do in 3 minutes? And in fact, the city, if I'm mayor, I will change that criteria at the city for sure. Because at the city, you have to go in, fill out some forms, and then if you got something on your mind, you have to fill it out, identify specifically what it is, and then maybe come before the city council maybe 2 or 3 months later. That's ridiculous. That person should be given the opportunity to speak up right then and there. In fact, the first thing I thought about, where's the ombudsman? I think we did have an ombudsman here at the city of Portland, but I've never seen him since I last saw Vera Katz. But that's a sad situation. And the county basically is the same situation. I've met some very interesting folks being in the front of the county and speaking before that group. Very, very, very important. And the resentment that I had at an early time, trying to get back some of the, I'm from an old school. At one point in time, we always would open up a government meeting, a people's meeting, with the raising of a flag and a short prayer. What happened to that tradition? It's disappointing. And if I have anything to say about it, I want it reinstated. I want that flag. I want people. See, we don't have the draft anymore, like I was. I volunteered in the service. I volunteered to get in the Marine Corps. There's nothing wrong with the military. Many of the young people that we have in our country, in this city, could be saved. They're not just gang members. They're young people looking for leadership, given the opportunity to get educated again, and come back out and serve this country. And we need them all. I'm sharing this with you because we need leadership, and we're right here now. We got many things going, but at the end of the day, it still has to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. All of the people, regardless of race and this, that, and the other. We can't afford to play around with race anymore. Everybody's gotten sophisticated. We've educated the whole world. And now all of a sudden, guess what? The leadership comes right back to the USA. That's what we're all about. Okay? God bless all of you. Again, thank you very much, Jack, for being a part of the Oregon Voters Digest today. Good luck. Hope to see you again. And in all due respect, if you don't mind, I'm going to bring you back and then kind of share with us some of your other exploits as you going around knocking on doors, through your home, on your phone, etc. Okay?
Bruce, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Well, folks, that's the Voters Digest, and we're just going to go on and give it up at this point in time, and I'll see you next week. Take care. And again, like I said, tell your friends. Tell everybody within the neighborhood, and make sure you get out and vote. express yourself. Very important to be involved. And by the way, if you want to get in touch with Jack, say a couple words to him, all you have to do is pick up that voters pamphlet or call up the city. His phone number is sitting right there where he filed for office. I'm going to let you do some of the work. And if you want to call him, you can call him. Trust me, he will talk to you. I know that about Jack already. He's a good man. Again, that's a good point. Another point I want to make. Again, I'll see you next week, and we'll have another candidate on, for sure. Okay? Take care.